feel about pie?
Now on Mackey and Judd,
This chart makes it as clear as I can to you.
the pie chart of blame.
You want to blame somebody?
Judd Zolgad, this is the final pie chart of the 2020
I love the pie.
season.
This makes me so sad. I love the pie charts. They're so much fun. Blame, a lot of fun. Praise is good too. Blame, tons of fun. All right, I have, because it's the last one, I went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of pie. I split this up.
Dude,
well,
7.
it's season ending.
Old school pie
it's
chart
season
here.
ending, so I really went through here and hashed through it. I probably did not give enough percentages to some folks.
You're like John
But I had
Madden
to
with
split
a
it up.
turducken on Thanksgiving
Exactly.
right now.
This is the last one. I had to do a thorough job. Should I start at the top or the bottom?
I'm like a gentleman. You should work your way up.
Okay.
Start on the bottom.
Wait a second. What?
That was said correctly. I said start at the bottom and work your way up.
A gentleman doesn't start down there, does he?
Maybe it's a Score North After Dark conversation. This might be the debut topic.
Rock knows
I got
how you
nothing.
feel about pie.
All right.
I got
I feel like
nothing.
a gentleman starts somewhere else, but not Declan.
Yeah, which might explain a lot of things about
Men are
Declan.
a microwave.
Which might explain Declan's Twitter account sometimes.
Men are a microwave. Women are an oven. Just maybe say that. I don't know.
Here's Judd's pie
Here's the
chart.
pie
Here's my pie chart of
Right
blame
here.
for the Vikings 2020 7-9 season. 10% I will start at the bottom, as Dex suggested. 10% I'm going to split between Jalil Johnson and Shamar Stefan.
Now I'm thinking about those two in a completely different way.
Yeah, they're at the bottom figuratively in the pie chart of blame. The defensive line, they're not good, but they still played and they had to play, and it was just awful. Like, we are used to, really, for the most part, aside from a couple different occasions, since I started to cover this team full time in 2005, the interior of the defensive line has been great. The Williams wall, right? Like, you've had a lot of good players play the 3 technique and the nose tackle, Linval Joseph. And once Michael Pierce opted out, you had Shamar Stefan. And Jalil Johnson, who, by the way, is Zim's guy, was drafted by the Vikings in 2017 and hasn't developed at all, really. So 10%. 10%. Sort of the poster child here for the defense. I'm going to pick on this guy because he was supposed to be good, and he was not. Anthony Harris. Look, the secondary and the corners in particular were young, okay? And I get that. And I get that Harris and Smith probably tried to freelance to help the corner some, but Anthony Harris was signed to a franchise tag of $11.4 million for 2020. That doesn't give you a lot of room to be like, well, did you see the young corners? I was trying to help them out. That gives you room to be a Pro Bowl player.
Yeah.
And you didn't come close. And ultimately, Vikings were probably justified by the fact that they didn't sign him to a rich long-term deal. But 10% goes to a guy who I expected would be really good and went from 6 picks in 2019 to 0 in 2020. 10% has to go to the guards, Dakota Dozier, and anyone else who played right guard before Ezra Cleveland, who did, to his credit, stabilize things, okay? Dozier was, in his defense, put in a position to fail. But you don't have to fail that badly. And he did. He's a backup. He is nothing more than a fringe backup. And I believe he started something like 4 games for the Vikings in 2019. So you sort of saw him play. So did you sit down and watch the film and couldn't see the film? Like, what were you doing?
Yeah, and also, was Brett Jones, did anyone actually see him physically on the premises? I know he was on the roster all season, but
how bad must he be if they're like, you know what, Dakota?
But that's the crazy thing, and the Twins would do this sometimes when I covered them, where they would keep running a pitcher out there or a player out there that had no business being a starter because, well, I mean, you haven't seen these guys on the bench in the minor leagues. We know that they're not good enough. We know that Anthony Slam is not good enough, right? And it's like the Vikings. Dakota Dozier, by almost any measurement, Pro Football Focus, is one of the 3 or 4 worst offensive linemen in the league, and you played him all year.
Yes, 16 starts, correct?
At no point do you just maybe sit the guy for 2 weeks and see if taking a break can help him. I don't know. It was a super weird, stubborn thing for them to stick with him all season.
So I'm not completely going to blame him because it's not all his fault, but 10% does go to the fact that he was supposed to be a National Football League player and was essentially, I think, had about 3 sacks of Kirk by himself because he kept getting pushed back into Kirk and tripping him.
Yeah.
10% goes to Coobs, Gary Kubiak. And you ask why? I'll tell you why. Hey, it's 2nd and long. What should we do? Let's run. Where's the motion? Well, who needs motion? Okay. Boy, time for a big play. Big play. We got Jefferson. We got Thielen. We got Irv Smith Jr. We've got Kirk, our multi-million-dollar quarterback. What should we do, Coobs and Zim? Well, let's give it to Dalvin. No, I said we need a big play here. Anyway, the offense definitely, to me, look, statistically, I think it's good. So people will harp on the stats and say, look, Kirk had a big year. You don't get this and get that. But again, go to the eye test. We all watched the games and we all saw the flaws and we all saw what that offense, what we believe that offense with a lot of its particular skill position players, particular skills, what they had, right? And then what they did. I'm not saying that Cook is not a great player. I am saying that you had a lot of options as well beyond him at times and didn't explore them. And it is still criminal. It is criminal that in the first 2 games in which you lost to Green Bay and the Colts, that you basically looked at Justin Jefferson and said, oh, he's young, not yet.
You know, that's the one thing I don't know how much to criticize them for because there was no preseason. They weren't able to see him like in actual game mode. And so did he learn a lot by sitting for a couple of weeks?
He had a great camp. No,
it seems like a botch, but we don't.
It's a botch. It's a botch. Moss came in from day one, right? And they basically said, oh, this guy's good.
So let's say he plays, just let's do this hypothetical because the Vikings essentially came up a win shy of the playoffs, depending on tiebreakers and stuff. If they beat the Bears, they're in. But which of those first 2 games was more winnable if they would have given you a full dose of Justin Jefferson? Because they couldn't move the ball at all against the Colts, right? The Packers scored 43 in that first week.
The Packers game, I think, is a no. I think the Colts game was. But, I mean, give yourself a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw that guy in camp, and he ran really good routes, and he was prepared. And you essentially spent 2 weeks. I mean, he had 6 targets in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He had, I think, something like, 12 or 13 on Sunday? So, anyway, 10% to Coobs. 10% goes to Kirk Cousins. All right? You rebounded after the 1-5 start. I get that. But here's why I'm putting the 10% on you. And this is completely fair. And I will give you 1 game. I will give you 1 day. I will give you 1 time. I will boil this down to not a bunch of general Cousins bashing things, but one thing. The Falcons game. Okay? Now, I know that the Vikings got blown out and played terrible. But the Falcons were winless coming into that game. And do you know who I need to shove that day, like from the get-go? You know who I need to just step up and shove it down the Falcons' bleep? It's Kirk Cousins. And he had 3 picks, and he had a pick, I believe, on his first pass from scrimmage. That's inexcusable. And Kirk Cousins, that is 1 game. The defense takes on the majority of the blame for the fact that this team is not a playoff team, all right? And against the Falcons, they played a terrible game. But I'm going to tell you right now, I put the Falcons' loss on Cousins' day. Because if Kirk Cousins that is the game, Phil, where Kirk Cousins should have come out and said, my defense might not be playing well, but I don't care. The Falcons have not won a game. We're going to go toe-to-toe, and if we need to win, this goes back to the Cousins quote after the Falcons game to open 2019, right? If we need to win 52-51, sometimes we need to.
Yeah. Yeah, I almost feel like because Kirk was so ridiculously good after the bye, and it's the best stretch of football he's ever played in his career, probably in his life, and he's been just bonkers good since the bye week. So he deserves credit for that. But they started 1-5 in large part because he led the league in interceptions and some, like, there was a Hail Mary in there and there was a tip, like Thielen dropped one. But like that Falcons game, the way he started, and there was a couple other ones in there
Titans
too.
Game, a field goal, get a field goal, you win,
and or convert a game-winning drive on one of those. Now you could say, well, why doesn't the offensive line just get a yard against the Seahawks? Okay, yes, he wasn't the sole reason why they started 1-5, But let's not just ignore how bad he played for the most part in that 1-5 start. So
yes,
it's very fair of you to put him on your.
And
pie
that
chart.
Falcons game to me was disgusting. Like that was a complete. You were going into the bye. You could have had a win at that point. You're 2-4, and you just were awful. 15% goes a larger chunk goes to perhaps a surprising, perhaps not a surprising candidate, the Marwin Magoofs. Your special teams can't. How? Like he has to be fired, right? This is not a Dan Bailey went cold at the end of season case. This is an lifetime 2020 season achievement award.
Also, what's the bigger upset that Marwin kept his job for all 16 games, or that Adam Gase kept his job for all 16 games with the Jets?
Considering who runs the Vikings and who could have fired Magoof. I mean, I don't understand it.
Magoof.
They couldn't return anything. It was just a continual. It was like every week that there was going to be a different element of special teams that cratered. And there was. All right, and we will wrap this up, my large pie chart of blame for the Vikings 2020 disappointment, with a 35% chunk that's going to be split between two guys, and I think you know who they are. Come on down, Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman, okay? You didn't get help after Pierce opted out for the interior defensive line, despite the fact that there were some cheap veteran options who at least could have been given a look, but you didn't do that, okay? We spent all spring, basically, and summer saying, are you going to get a veteran cornerback just to help out and stabilize things? Because you got Danceler and Gladney and Hughes. And your answer was, eventually, we're going to pick up Chris Jones, who didn't like to tackle, and that's part of football last time I checked. You traded a second-round pick for Unique Ngakoue, which excited us at the time, but then after 6 games, Spielman traded him, but by the way, I believe that he will lead the team in sacks, which is hysterically funny.
Yeah, I think that's true.
It's awesome.
But you also then came back after the bye, after trading Ngakoue, and were like bound and determined that you could still win games, which you did for a while. So your message to me and the team, I think, was confusing. The left guard position was addressed with Dakota Dozier. 35% goes to decisions both on and off the field by the GM and coach.
Okay.
So I go 35% to Spielman and Zim, 15% to the Magoofs, 10% each to Cousins, Kubiak, the guards led by Dakota Dozier, Anthony Harris, and the final 10% split between Jalil Johnson and Shamar Steph.
All right, that's a lot of pie right there.
Ton of pie.
Yep.
The Rock knows how you feel
Full.
about pie.
I like it. Well, you wouldn't be more full because there's 7 slices, Yogi Berra. It's the same
Full.
amount of pie.
But I ate the whole pie.
Didn't Yogi Berra get asked that question one time?
I consumed the whole pie.
Mr. Berra, would you like your pie cut up in 4 or 8 slices?
And you wanted
And
8?
he said, better make it 4. I don't know if I can eat 8.
I love it. No,
So-
I'm full because this is a big pie chart of blame.
All right, here's my pie chart to blame for a 7-9 season, and I'm cutting mine into 4 equal pieces here.
The Rock knows how you feel about pie.
I'm not gonna go like there's probably 12 different pieces you could dole out here, but I'm gonna go 4 different categories. Okay, let's start with a couple cop-out categories. All right, a couple exoneration slices of pie. Slice number 1 is the fact that you drafted 15 rookies. The fact that instead of potentially packaging picks up and consolidating and drafting 8 players and moving up the board, the Vikings played the volume game. And I'm not even like fighting that strategy. They made a decision going into the season saying, listen, we're strapped for cap space. We're going to play the lottery a little bit here. And we're just hoping that by drafting 15 rookies, more of them pan out. Justin Jefferson, I mean, it's actually been a pretty good year for throwing rookies into the fire. You found out that Justin Jefferson's a star. I think Cam Danceler is going to be a star. Jeff Gladney looks like he's on the way to being a good player. And then there's other success stories here in the wings, but you knew by drafting 15 rookies and going in without a bunch of high impact free agents and players that this was a bit of a transition season. So that has to be accounted for. That's slice of pie number 1. Slice of pie number 2, another exoneration slice here. COVID and injuries. You have to acknowledge the fact that Danielle Hunter, Michael Pierce, Eric Kendricks missed basically all of December. And Anthony Barr, even though we rag on him and he's not lived up to what we thought in the contract, he's still one of your starting linebackers. And at times throughout the season can be an impact player. And by taking him off the field and by taking Eric Kendricks off the field for some of your most important games, guys like Todd Davis have to play meaningful snaps for 3 hours.
Mhm.
And that's a problem. In fact, when you go up and down and look at the defensive players that had to play meaningful snaps for this team, okay, this is a team that was number 1 in defense 3 years ago and went to the NFC Championship game with borderline Hall of Famers all over the place, right? And Vikings Ring of Honor guys, okay? Here are let's go through a list of like 12 or 15 real quick. These are the players that played the most snaps defensively for the Vikings, and this is mostly due to injuries, COVID, opt-outs, and general transition. So Anthony Harris led the team in snaps. Eric Wilson was second, and he had a pretty good season. He's also a backup linebacker. Eric Wilson is I'm talking because they're playing nickel more often than not. Eric Wilson is a backup linebacker who played over 1,000 snaps for you in 2020. Okay, that was
good though.
But their plan wasn't for him to play 1,000 snaps. So make note. Harrison Smith, 1,000 snaps. Gladney, a rookie, 4th most snaps. Eric Kendricks, 5th most. Odenigbo, he's a 3rd down pass rusher. He played the 6th most snaps for you. Shamar Stephen, Jaleel Johnson, Jalen Holmes, 7, 8, and 9, all backup players were top 10 in snaps for you.
That's why why did you not go out? There were guys available and sign an interior defensive lineman at some point.
Well, they did. Michael, you mean after Michael Pierce?
Yes. Snacks Harrison was out there 1,000 times. I mean, he just got picked up by the Packers. I mean, give yourself a chance.
Yeah, I don't know. Did they not kick the tires on Snacks? Did they not raid the cupboards looking for Snacks?
I think Zimmer thought that he had developed guys behind his starters, and the fact is he really hasn't.
Yeah. Number 10 on the snaps list, another rookie in Cam Danceler. Number 11, another rookie in DJ Wanham. Number 12, basically another rookie in Armand Watts, who I think was a 6th round pick in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Boyd probably should not have been playing 343 snaps this season. He was 13th on your list. Unique Ngakoue got traded. And then Hercules Mataafa, who's been back and forth, practice squad, bounce around. He was 15th. 16th, Todd Davis should not be playing 281 NFL snaps.
Yep.
And Chris Jones should not be playing 267 NFL snaps. Like tons of dudes who are just either not NFL starting players or probably not even roster guys. Like Chris Jones wasn't supposed to be on their roster.
No, but they could have, there were guys out there for relatively cheap that they passed by.
So,
I fault at cornerback, I fault them completely.
So that's one of my slices, COVID and injuries leading to playing all these backup players. Slice of pie, number 3 in the pie chart of blame, the Vikings' general historical offensive line negligence, especially pass protection. The Vikings have become, and Mike Zimmer is the one that's pulling some of these strings. They've become so obsessed with getting the band back together defensively and bringing Anthony Barr back in and paying 2 safeties over $11 million. And even offensively, like, oh man, we should probably eat some broccoli, but let's go pay for the flashy takeout meal, Dalvin Cook, right? Like,
yeah.
If given the opportunity to spend $12 million to fortify your offensive line or to sign a flashy running back to an extension, I know it sucks to think about Dalvin Cook not being on the Vikings, but your offensive line and your pass protection has been a huge problem for years. In fact, I went through the Pro Football Focus rankings in the Mike Zimmer era, okay? And if I'm Mike Zimmer, this is something in my job review for the year, I am bringing this up, damn it. Pro Football Focus pass block rankings, okay? Vikings were 28th this season in pass protection. They were 27th last year in pass protection.
Mm-hmm.
They were 27th in 2018 in pass protection.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kirk Cousins has done pretty well statistically in those 3 years, despite having bottom 5 rated pass protection and him not being mobile at all. So feather in Kirk's cap for overcoming some of that and improving some doubters wrong, maybe like myself. In 2017, they were top. Well, actually, I shouldn't say they were top half of the league. They were 17th. So they were right around average in 2017. I think part of that might be because Case Keenum was more mobile and probably bailed out the offensive line in certain situations where Kirk Cousins didn't. And I know that PFF tries to separate that, but 17th. The other 3 years, the first 3 years, 30th, 28th, and 23rd. They've never been top half of the league in the Mike Zimmer era in pass protection. And they've had mostly statue quarterbacks because Teddy Bridgewater wasn't the most mobile guy either. And Sam Bradford was less than mobile. If we think Kirk Cousins isn't mobile, Sam Bradford was rooted to the turf.
Yeah, he couldn't move.
And they've still managed to put up some pretty big passing seasons because they have at least guys who can throw the ball. So this is more of an organizational thing. They've whiffed on some guys. They whiffed on Matt Khalil back in the day. They may have whiffed on Garrett Bradbury. They whiffed on Pat Elflein. Or they haven't developed these guys like some other franchises do. And it's a huge problem. And so it probably causes them, we sit here and say, why don't you throw the ball more? And they might say, because our offensive line can't hold up for more than a second and a half.
But that's their fault because they signed Kirk. They knew they knew exactly who they were going to get in Kirk when they signed him, and they still have allowed that. That's it's mind-boggling that you would buy the car and not a garage.
It is super weird. And they did it with Bridgewater too. They drafted Bridgewater right at the beginning of the Mike Zimmer era. And Bridgewater played almost every snap in college in shotgun or pistol. And they said, this is our first round quarterback franchise guy. Listen, Teddy, we got Adrian Peterson here, and he hates taking handoffs out of shotgun and pistol. So you're going to have to learn how to work with your back to the defense for the first time in your life. Like when they draft a first rounder, they don't even say offensive line, system, everything caters to the quarterback. We'll figure out the running back aspect later. And this is the way it's been for 15 years with this franchise.
Yeah. But right now, I think it's identifiable by the fact that the head coach really does not give a whole heck of a lot of thought to the quarterback spot.
Or the offense in general.
Yeah. It's
Gary, just go figure it out.
It's the offense is along for the ride in an era now where nothing is more important than, let's see, your offense.
Yep.
The Rock knows how you feel about pie.
And my final piece of pie, as great as he played in the second half of the season, I'm giving my final piece of pie to the gravitational pull of Kirk Cousins to a 500 record. It doesn't matter how crappy he plays for stretches or how brilliantly he plays for stretches. Kirk Cousins in his career is 50, 51, and 2 as a starter. Actually, I take that back. He's now 51, 51, and 2, I believe.
That's perfect.
This is not counting yesterday's game. So he's exactly 500 as a starter. And his records as a starter are 9-7, 8-7-1, 7-9, 8-7-1, 10-5. Nice job. And 7-9. He is the definition of a 500 quarterback. No matter how well he plays, how poorly he plays, there's just something about Kirk Cousins that screams 500 record.
But you know what? It's fitting. It's like perfect. Because if you watch Kirk play, if I didn't give you records, if I just had you sit down and watch Kirk play, like game after game after game, it's Kirk Cousins hell, right? And we got done, and I said, what do you think about this guy? I think that you would say he's pretty good. He's fine. And he's about a 500 quarterback.
Yeah.
He really is.
And there's a lot of franchises that would benefit from just having a steady, just a guy that's going to go back there, and he might have a month of a meltdown. But this is where, and we'll get into these deep conversations. Purple Daily is going to be all about how to fix the Vikings for the next several weeks. But you got to figure out how far can you go with him playing at his best. You still wound up 7-9.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the best year he's probably ever had, especially when you just look at the post-bye stretch of play. It's the most touchdown passes.
Yes.
And people are going to say, well, yeah, okay. If he can keep playing that way and you fix the offensive line and you fix the defense and you do this over here, and the question becomes, can you do all those things when you're still paying him like 15% of the salary cap, which that's going to be the case this year and even more in 2022.
Yes.
Those are the big questions that have to be answered. So 25% to the gravitational pull of Kirk Cousins to 500, 25% to the Vikings' general offensive line negligence, 25% to COVID and injuries, and 25% to them going into the season knowing this was going to be a transition year, drafting 15 rookies. Pie chart of blame.
The one thing is, off your last point, if you go in knowing that it's a transitional year and that it might not be that great, and then you milk 7 wins, it frustrates me more. Like if you know what? And by the way, at the bye, you're 1-5, right? Like you can officially say, okay, this is not our year. What can we do? What will most benefit the Minnesota Vikings, right?
Yeah.
These losses aren't such a bad thing.
This was the worst case scenario.
No, I'm going to pull out every last garbage victory. We're going to go beat those Lions.
And this is like when they were 1-5 and we were sitting there saying, listen, the trade deadline's coming up. You guys can go unload some of your starters. Go unload Adam Thielen if you want to. We're not gonna yell at you too much if you do that. Go unload starting defensive players and get some draft picks and build this thing back up for the next 3 years. I would have been fine with that. As it stands, they started to make a run. It looked like they were going to get into the playoffs, and they were playing hot. And it was like, are they going to be this team that nobody wants to face? And they wound up in the absolute worst possible spot, which is the 14th pick instead of the 5th pick or the 2nd pick or whatever.
Which we did talk about.
But when Kirk Cousins is your starting quarterback, you're not going to be bad enough to pick in the top 3 of the top 5.
And you used Dalvin Cook for every last drop too. Like you got a year from Cook that was just phenomenal, and you won 7 games.
Yep.
The Rock knows how you feel about pie.
All right, Declan, your pie chart of blame, 7 and 9.
All right, I have 6 pieces of pie to hand out. I have
you
6.
guys.
Like to see
I have
it.
6.
Zolgadian.
6 pieces of pie.
Go Sports
Again,
Son.
bottom to the top. Starting 5%. I will give it to COVID. 5% to COVID. Basically, no abbreviated training camps, virtual meetings.
COVID, thanks you.
And see, everyone had those things.
For sure.
Like when I put COVID in mind, I'm not counting like the things that everyone had to deal with.
Yeah.
But
So I do think it plays obviously a part in the football season. So I'm just gonna give it 5%. It's just a little tiny. It's like a bite of pie. It's not even a slice. It's a bite of pie. 10% to ineptitude. Ineptitude by defined as you started 1-5. All right. Then you rattle off some wins, but then you can't beat Andy Dalton and the Cowboys. You can't beat the Chicago Bears at home. You figure out a way to be inept constantly. And it's extremely frustrating as a Vikings fan. And I have a statement that kind of goes with this on Purple Daily, but how you had this like basically prolific offense. Like it was the best Vikings offense since Brett Favre and Dante in 2004 when he almost won the MVP. And yet it never really truly felt like this offense was with it in the times. It was behind still establishing the run. You have someone like Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins having career seasons, and it still doesn't, it feels like something's off. So ineptitude, 10% to the ineptitude. I'm also putting 10% on Kirk Cousins. I originally didn't have him in my pie chart of blame, but I'm adding him to it here. 10% to Kirk for being exactly what Phil said, a 500 quarterback. Yes, his raw box score numbers are fantastic. Everyone can see that. He rebounded after a horrible start and put up one of the best seasons of his career. But Kirk Cousins is who he is. Someone tweeted us a graphic yesterday that, had all the statistics that, Kirk leads in the NFL since entering in 2012. And, he's top 5 in basically every major category. So imagine if you give him an offensive line or a defense. But this is who he is. Like, this is who he, do you think he's going to be more than that? I don't think he's going to be more than that. He is who he is. So 10% to Kirk Cousins. I will put 20% on the Vikings offensive line. Yes, it's been neglected for basically the better part of the last 6-7 years. You started Drew Samia and you basically injured reserved him on a phantom. I don't believe that dude ever got hurt. I just think you were like, we can't play this guy.
Oh, he got hurt.
So
his pride
bad.
was damaged
his
beyond
pride
belief.
got hurt. You had to run out poor Dakota Dozier. Garrett Bradbury maybe looked at the first half season like, oh, maybe this is a competent center, but I don't know if you even pick up that 5th-year option at this point. That's still up in the air. The offensive line was awful. And until you can protect them, or protect Kirk Cousins and have a competent line, it's going to be tough to win football games. So 20% of the blame to the offensive line. 25% on the coaching staff. I think Mike Zimmer, although he lost all of his basically studs on defense and my best Randy voice there, you have to figure out ways to get creative. And I think that's what really frustrated me about Zimmer is he just kept running out Adenabos. He didn't scheme up a safety blitz. He didn't scheme up a cornerback blitz. I feel like there was other ways, and maybe I'm just uneducated, but like there's other ways to scheme up how to get pressure on the quarterback. When there was those games against like Dalton and what it was, where there was only like 3 or 4 pressures per game going on a quarterback, 3 or 4 over the course of the whole game. How the hell does that happen?
Because you're afraid. But the problem then is a personnel problem, because that's where you had to get a veteran or two, and he didn't do that. Chris Jones playing was inexcusable.
I think it's a personnel thing. Like I don't think Mike Zimmer just woke up and forgot how to scheme defense. No, I think at a certain point it's like.
But this is why we told him what to do last spring. You've got to have at least one veteran corner. He doesn't have to be a Pro Bowl player, but like there was no one on that back end corner wise to stabilize things. Nobody. And the fact that they ignored that in May, to me, is what bit them in the ass in November.
So yeah, I put 25% of the coaching staff. Coobs is in that realm as well. Always running on 2nd and 10, having two of the best wide receiver duos in the league, but still feeling like we're not utilizing them. Irv Smith didn't really come on to like basically the last 6 or 7 games. I believe both Kubiak and Zimmer deserve the equal part of the blame in coaching. So 25% of that in my pie chart of blame. My final pie chart, final piece of pie in my pie chart goes to injuries. I'll put 30% on the injuries. It is my biggest chunk of pie. But it's 30%. I mean, you lost Danielle Hunter at the beginning of the season. And then basically you had no cornerback to help you out. Eric Kendricks gets hurt. It was a horrible situation on defense for the Vikings, and Anthony Barr getting hurt also did not help things. So I'll put injuries on there. Like, it definitely was a part of it, and it's my biggest chunk of pie, but it's not going to be over 50% of the reason why the Vikings finished 7-9. It's my biggest at 30%, but injuries do obviously play a factor in where the Vikings finish this year. So my pie chart of blame on the season goes 5% to COVID, 10% to ineptitude, 10% to Kirk Cousins, 20% on the offensive line, 25% on the coaching staff, 30% of the injuries. That is my pie chart.
There it is, gentlemen.
The Rock knows how you feel about pie.
Final pie charts of the season. So I'm just looking at some of the exit quotes that are coming out while we record this show here today. Also, some of the firings. Anthony Lynn just got axed.
Doug Marrone was fired early this morning in Jacksonville.
Marrone, Adam Gase.
Gase got fired last night
who apparently
by the Jets.
is being considered by Nick Saban to be his next OC.
Adam Gase.
Oh, that's not surprising.
But you guys see who the next Jaguars coach is probably going to be.
Urban Meyer.
Urban Meyer.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
By the way, I thought quit his last 2 coaching jobs because of health concerns.
Okay, good luck in the NFL.
I can tell you what's really healthy, NFL.
I don't see
that lifestyle's a piece of cake.
I'm trying to figure out how much. I mean,
but is he really? I mean, has he really been sick? I have no idea.
I think he was still in his 40s when he had health issues with Florida, so he's not that old. He's only like 53 years old. Urban Meyer. Right. He looks like he's 70.
But like, I can't figure out if he really has a health condition that is truly a concern, or if that's just the fallback for when he leaves.
I think it's more of a fallback. I don't know. I think it's more like, we got some recruiting violations on the horizon here.
The quote I saw from the Jags that's positively frightening is this. Shad Khan, who owns the team, evidently has control of the roster and made it clear that he will maintain control for now, even when he brings in new people.
Wait, say that again?
So the guy that owns the Jaguars, Shad Khan.
Yeah,
okay?
He also owns AEW Wrestling on TNT Wednesday nights.
Brilliant man, I'm sure, right? But I guess he has control. He has final say of the 53-man roster.
But don't all owners really have final say over the 53-man
roster?
No,
it sounds like he makes decisions. It would be
so he's like Jerry Jones?
Ziggy, yes. It would be like if Ziggy was trying to dictate personnel decisions.
But do you think Shad Khan's going to hire Urban Meyer and say, all right, listen, Urban, here's my thoughts on who the cornerback should be?
Who knows? I would hope he wouldn't, but
he's a smart guy.
Just because you're smart in real life does not mean you're smart in sports.
We'll see. He's doing a great job with AEW. I think they've been beating.
I'm really glad he is.
Beating NXT.
But I'll tell you what,
night.
He's doing a horse crap job with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are going to get a quarterback. Like, that is the ultimate time to get your guys in place, draft Trevor Lawrence, and just back off.
What happens to Gardner Minshew if Trevor Lawrence is the?
He's all yours, pick? Phil Mackey. If you want to send him a draft.
Honestly,
pick.
I'd rather have Gardner Minshew at $500,000 for a couple years than Matt Stafford or Kirk Cousins. Some of these $30 million guys who.
Can he run a little bit?
Gardner? Oh, yeah.
I think he can move a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, then you know what?
Uncle Rico, man.
With this offensive line, that wouldn't be a bad idea.
Gentlemen, we like to bring in the vent lines of other fan bases on this show. Packer vent line has not been very fruitful for us because they finished 13-3 and might win the Super Bowl.
This has been a crappy year for us on Packer vent line.
I told Judd this. I enjoy watching the Packers in 2020. I enjoy it.
Declan last Monday basically came clean and said
they're fun.
He is as close as one can get, Phil Mackey, to being an actual Packer fan.
Yeah, honestly, like I've kind of, I don't enjoy watching the Packers necessarily, but I don't get joy from watching the Packers lose like a bunch of other Vikings fans.
Get joy from the post-game calls when they do lose, though.
Correct.
It is hilarious.
Come on.